open. So hello everyone, you listen to another episode of Let's Talk Sports with Tim McCain, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Burt Watson of Burt Watson Promotions for UFC. I have a former manager for Joe Frazier, the great Joe Frazier.
Smoking Joe Frazier, baby.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So my first question to you is, when did your love for the fight game begin?
Well, Tim, I grew up in Philadelphia. I'm a Philly boy. I'm a hood rat with a little bit of an education.
Yes.
So I've always had that in my blood a little bit, and grew up listening to the fights and boxing on the radio with my dad. I'm dating myself now. I'm telling you how old I am because I wasn't looking necessarily at television. I was listening to it, and it was promoted by Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, which probably don't even exist anymore. But I've always had a love of the sport and always knew how to throw them hands, But then eventually as my life evolved, going to high school in Philadelphia and going to a small college in Nebraska, and then going into the Marine Corps.
Oh, wow.
Getting, I was in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam era, served my country.
Yes, sir.
And when I got out, I had a very chance meeting with Joe Frazier. When I say chance, meaning an off the wall meeting with Joe Frazier, and one thing led to another, and we met and then met again and finally got together and, started actually hanging out together.
Wow.
From that meeting. And I won't say I was a fanboy. Yeah, I was probably a fanboy. But I was with Smoking Joe Frazier, the not at the time, but former heavyweight champion of the world, and knowing about that fight and having did some things around March 8th, 1971, and all that culminating to me being with him and meeting him, and kind of getting a friendship together between the two of us, which we did, which eventually we started hanging out together, and Joe was a baller. When I say a baller, meaning, baller in my day was a little different than what you guys call a baller now. Okay. He liked going out, and we were hanging out and drinking, and then when we were done, we would go home and he'd go his way and I'd go my way. And that kind of started to get in my way.
Oh, wow.
And I actually said to him, you got to do one or two things. You either got to leave me the hell alone or hire me.
Wow.
So guess what he did?
He hired you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, he did.
So, Burt, what made Joe, because I remember reading about, MMA Junkie. It was a couple of years ago when Joe Frazier passed away. You said that he was so much different than just, a superstar boxer. He was like down to earth. He was for the people. What made Joe Frazier different than other fighters?
Well, I'll get cliche with this. I'll use an old cliche. Joe didn't forget where he came from. He always remembered and realized, and the irony is, I'm from South Carolina, same place Joe is from.
Wow.
He's from Beaufort and I'm from a little place called Hugh G, Monk's Corner. So we came from the South. We were Southern boys and always had respect for yourself, respect for adults and people around you and people of always had respect. Even though being African American, that became a little more than just respect. At some point, sometimes it was discipline, and I can go on and on and on with that. But he never forgot that. And, the simple fact that he and I met, and I was just somebody that he met. I wasn't a celebrity. I wasn't in that world, knew absolutely nothing about that world except what I read and what I saw on television.
Yeah.
You know, and as far as managing someone, had no idea what to do with that. But he was comfortable enough as a person to listen to me and to let me in his world. And he did. And I mean, very few times, I think I spoiled Joe Frazier more than Joe spoiled himself.
Really?
Okay, because I kind of put myself in the frame of mind of dealing with a celebrity and dealing with those guys and kind of thinking what it should be like and what it should be and what he should have. So when I made personal appearances for him or scheduled personal appearances, a lot of things I said we needed to have wasn't necessarily what he said or what he wanted. But he let me do that. But, he had a gym in Philly. And back in the day, we had guys like Meldrick Taylor come to the gym smoking, Burt Cooper, James Schuler, Tyrell Biggs, Willie the Worm Monroe. We had guys that came through Joe's gym, and his gym was on the corner of North Philadelphia in the heart of the hood, where a lot of gyms were.
Right.
And he was very, very comfortable with that. As big of a celebrity as he was very, very comfortable with if we were in the gym and the gym day was over and we wanted to go have a drink. Back in the day, we called it a shot of liquor.
Okay.
All right. We wanted to do something like that. We didn't go up on the hill to do that, or on Fifth Avenue or New York. We did it right in the neighborhood, right in the hood. And when we walked in there, everybody knew Joe. Everybody, there were people. We walked in the place one time, and there was a couple of guys sitting at the bar, a little tanked up, and the guy looked over and saw Joe and did a double take. He had no idea. First he thought, then he didn't think, and then he had to check with the guy that was with him because they were both a little tanked up. He just couldn't believe that Smoking Joe Frazier was there.
Wow.
And that's the kind of person that he was. There were things that we went through and different places that we went that he was the celebrity that he was, but from the state of his heart and the state of his mind, he was as humble as you could ever see a superstar. Wow. And he was a superstar. He was Smoking Joe Frazier. And right now, today, I will go on record and I will say that in our lifetime, we will probably never see two heavyweight fighters get in a ring and put on the fight that those two guys did in our lifetime. And the Thrill in Manila and the March 8th, 1971 and, all those, you'll never see that kind of heavyweight fight in boxing that you did then. That's just the person he was. Even down to in his training. When Joe was in training, he was in training. He was on lockdown. You didn't have to tell him to get on lockdown.
Wow.
He was on lockdown.
I could tell by the way he fought.
Oh yeah. He was serious. And he wasn't a statuous guy. He didn't have the muscular build and so forth. But and the guys he fought, I'm gonna tell you something, Tim. I did a video called Champions Forever.
Okay.
Which was something we did in 19. You look that up, Google it, Champions Forever. And it was a documentary of Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, wow, Larry Holmes, and Ken Norton of the 5 fights that those guys did together in their lifetime. Mm-hmm. And Ion, which now is a major television network, did the tour. And I traveled with those guys. In fact, I was the only one that traveled the entire time with all 5 of them. Mm. You know, sometimes Larry's people would go, sometimes Muhammad's people would go, you know, and then when they started splitting the 2 guys up, they would send me on different ways. But how I brought that up was Joe was probably the smallest out of all those 5 guys. Mm-hmm. Those guys were, and for the very first time, that I was in the presence of those 5 guys, I was stunned to see how big, first of all, how big Muhammad was in comparison with George and Larry and Ken. And then as they got older, when I did this video, they were all retired and done. They were still huge guys. They were still big guys, you know, and Joe fought through that. So when he trained and got in shape, he stayed in shape. He stayed in training. Wow. And when he wasn't and we was out, we was out.
Okay, my last question about Joe. Outside of Joe Frazier, who were some of the great fighters that you trained with?
Well, I'll say this. I was never a trainer per se. I trained at, was taught by some of, you know, I worked out in the gym, and, you know, at the time Joe had Marvis Frazier and Tyrone Frazier, you know, and his son Joe Jr. and all those guys. You know, I had one fight and lost it and knew that wasn't what I needed to do. Okay. My first professional fight, I lost, and that was the end of it. I said, you know what? I'll just learn how to fight to keep people off my booty. But I'm not taking this up. But I worked I did more the coordinating aspect of it.
Interesting.
In the course of my career, mm-hmm. I coordinated fights for Mike Tyson, Oscar De La Hoya, Roy Jones, Tito Trinidad, Lopez, Evander Holyfield, Vinny Pazienza. The only fighter, Sugar Ray Leonard, I did the fight when Sugar Ray Leonard fought Camacho. Okay. I did a couple of his other fights. From 1985 or 88 to 1996, the only fighter I never worked with was Lennox Lewis.
Wow.
Anybody else in that era, Arturo Gatti, I did Zab Judah. I did a fight that involved those fighters. In fact, I did Tyson's last 5 fights. Four of them were his worst. he didn't like the last 4, but I did the last 5 fights, starting with when he fought Buster Mathis Jr. in Philadelphia, Don King Promotions, to the last one where it was McBride in Washington, D.C., and Layla Ali was on the undercard. And I did all of Layla's fights.
Yeah, I saw.
You know, Layla has 25 fights. I did 24 of them.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Actually, my last Joe Frazier question, it just came back to my mind. How would Joe Frazier fare in today's heavyweight boxing circle? With Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, how would he do against those guys?
I think Joe, and not because, you know, I was with Joe, worked with him, but Joe's technical style and his conditioning and his strength and his ability to take a punch would have helped him in today's boxing against those guys. You know, because these guys now, you know, I'm impressed with these guys because they are big guys that jab, they move around, and Joe was that. Joe would move, Joe would slip, and Joe would would be relentless and be up on you. And when you threw punches, he would get away from him. He would get away from him and he would throw. He would get away and throw, get away and throw. Wow. And that would help him sustain with these guys today because they do that. Unlike Mike Tyson. Okay. Tyson just charged you.
Yeah.
And threw it. And bullied you. And scared you to death. Okay? And when you set up to throw technically or to throw a punch, Tyson just came right through it. He just went boom, right on you. Okay, so when he did that, that negated everything that you had from the offset, and you ended up. Very few people, except for Muhammad Ali, knew how to fight back, running backwards.
Wow.
Muhammad Ali knew how to do that. And I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but
yeah,
most of his stuff was on a backward. Bing, 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 bing.
Yeah, he would
throw it back. He'd throw it backing up, and sometimes he'd be backing up so much you see him reaching for it.
Right.
But he knew where to go because he was backing up.
So he was always the hit and not get hit type mentality.
Bingo. But he perfected that. And Joe today would technically be able to get up under these guys and stay with them. And from a conditioning standpoint, if you weren't in shape, he'd wear you out.
I believe
he would wear you out.
I mean, the old school boxing rounds was 15 rounds. Now it's 12. So that conditioning definitely would help.
15. And it didn't start to get. Muhammad Ali was an enigma, technically, because he was quick, fast, and accurate with his punches. And you went from Muhammad Ali to Sugar Ray Leonard.
Wow.
That's a big gap.
Yeah.
But then Sugar Ray brought it back. He brought that swish technicality and that skill, and then it went from him to a little bit of De La Hoya and a lot of Tito Trinidad and Zab Judah. And then it went from that point to Roy Jones and then to Mayweather.
Yes, sir.
But Joe would have definitely survived with the days heavyweight.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I want to get into this. So what led you to go from boxing to UFC? That's interesting. UFC.
And you know what? It was another chance, maybe. Now I'm sitting there talking to you. I've had quite a few chances. Shit. Oh, can I say that on this?
Why not?
But I did, like I said, I worked with just about everybody in coordinating their fight. And coordinating is, I pulled a plow. I put all that backstage and all that stuff behind the scenes. I did all of it from the time they left home, the travels, the hotels, the trainings, the workout room, all of that. And I did the same thing in boxing that I did in MMA and that I still do. And I did a Costa Zoo. I don't know if you remember him. Costa Zoo. I did Costa Zoo. And I did Arturo Gatti. I did Arturo Gatti and De La Hoya for someone. And then that same promoter called me back to help him do another fight in Vegas, a couple of fights in Vegas for Costa Zoo at the MGM Grand. So then I started doing shows at the MGM Grand and then Mandalay, and then I caught the eye of Showtime and HBO.
Wow. And
like what you guys are doing now, like what you do now.
Yes, sir.
It's a timing thing. If I had called you today and said I needed to be on a 328, you'd have been on here at 328.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's that kind of thing. That's what I did. So between the two hotels, I was back and forth because they liked the way I did it, and I made sure the shows, when it started at 4:05, it started at 4:05. When it ended at 7:25, it ended at 7:25. And the network's kind of like that. So that's kind of how I got it back and forth. And the promoter that brought me back for Costa Zoo, and I was doing the weigh-in, and that promoter came to me, and the guy said to me, he said, "Listen, man, there's this guy that keeps bugging me and us about starting this organization, and I know he's looking for good people to put an organization together and to put the organizational structure of what he wants to do together. So I want you," and the promoter said to me, and I'm not mentioning the promoter's name because I'm not giving him no clout, you know. So he asked me, he said, "I want you to meet this guy because this guy is looking for somebody to help him do some shows." So I said, okay, I can't meet him now because of the weigh-in, but I'll meet him after the weigh-in. Okay. So after the weigh-in, this guy came into this guy's office, and we were going to go get a hot dog or something. And the guy came in, and the guy was Dana White. Wow. Dana White, maybe looked like he weighed maybe about $180, had hair, young guy. And he said to me, he came in, and it was a quick kind of a 20-minute, half an hour meeting. He said, "Listen, I'm going to be starting this organization. I'm going to be doing this stuff. Wow. Mixed martial arts. They didn't call it MMA. Okay. They called it mixed martial arts, and it's kind of like ultimate fighting." He said, "I'm going to be doing that, and I'm putting a new organization together, and I need somebody to kind of help and work." I didn't know what he needed, but he knew what I did because the promoter and everybody had already said. I said to Dana, "You pay me and respect me, you got me." Wow. That was plain and simple.
So you're part of two histories. You're part of two origin stories in a sense.
I did the very first UFC 30 under Dana White. Wow. First one. I was the coordinator and the only coordinator because what he did was he never told me how to do my job because I know how to do my job. He just make sure you get it done. So I had guys, I had a total of about 9 guys that I would take to different shows to work with me. So he told me, "Hey, you know what? This is the date, that I'm looking at, and this is what I want to do. You do what you do." So he just left me alone and just kind of gave me. Now this was in, I'd say probably around August or September of 1999. In January of 2000, he called me and said, "I'm doing a show probably next month." And I said, okay. That show was UFC 30 in Atlantic City. Wow. And being from Philly, I was glad to do that because that was a drive. That was a drive for me. But all he did, he introduced me to the matchmaker. At the time, the matchmaker was Joe Silver. The matchmaker put all the stuff together, all the fights together, and gave everything to myself. And he had another woman. Her name was Lisa Faircloth. And we just put everything together. Wow. Went to the hotel. I scouted the hotel. I scouted the workout rooms. I scouted the venue. I didn't do the setup because I don't ever deal with tickets and paying fighters. Okay. Ever. Okay. But everything else, I went and did the dressing rooms. I went and did the walkthroughs. I went and did the walkouts, the training rooms, all those things. But I only did those things from what I was told because I had never, ever, ever done a wrestling, MMA, mixed martial arts, or ultimate fighting ever before. But when you coordinate combat sports, the basics are all the same. if you do it right. The fluff is different.
Interesting.
But the basics are all the same. So I knew I had to get room for this, room for that. But the one difference that was a little different was that in boxing, you get a dressing room. I could get a dressing room as the size of my office,
Yeah.
you know, for boxing, because they stood up. You had 2 or 3 guys. I could put 3 guys in here because they stood up and they, you know. But then when I went to MMA, it was different because they was throwing people against the wall and shit. They was rolling all, so they needed all the rooms. I couldn't have any sharp ends. I couldn't have anything on the walls, anything on the floors. But I had to learn that.
Wow.
Because all that was new to me. So I eventually went from needing this much space to this much space just to work out, just to train, and then traveling with mats and all that other stuff. So I did the very first UFC 2000, and I did every UFC from UFC 30 up to 185 to include the Ultimate Fighter, to include what is now called the Contender, because then it was not the Contender series, but it was called Tough.
Okay.
It was called the Ultimate Fighter, so they just called it Tough, TUF series. I did every one through that.
I remember watching one with Nick Diaz. Nate Diaz was in it. I remember that one.
When he won?
Yes.
Yes.
Won. Yes.
Yeah. And
I wish I had more time to speak, because I was going to ask you about questions like what led you to start your boxing promotion, but I actually have, you know, let me go ahead and ask this. Hopefully Zoom doesn't kick me off. But
don't worry about it. I got you, baby.
Okay, cool. My next question is, what led you to start your own promotion company, and are you looking for fighters currently?
Well, what led me to start my own promotion company, because it is what I do, and it is what I've been doing for everybody else all my life. Okay, I've always coordinated events for boxing and MMA and the grunt work, the groundwork. That's what I do. So the only thing I didn't have was the financial resources. But then, like everybody else, they went and got sponsors, or went and got somebody to sponsor them, or went to get somebody to do whatever. But the fact that I knew what it takes, or whatever it takes to put a show together, it was a natural thing for me to just, you know what? I did shows for everybody else. If I'm going to stay in this business, why not do it for myself? So, and Burt Watson Promotion has always been, I've never used anything but my name. And I figured, you know what? You know, I'm not a brand, marketing person, you know, about branding and all that, but I do know that I have my name, and that's the only thing I've ever used. So I kept that, and that's what I use.
You know, so many celebrities, so many business people, they kind of lose their names, but for you to own it, that's amazing. That's an achievement in itself. But I just want to say, if you're looking for fighters, one of the fighters, he's very passionate, he's dedicated. His name is Adrian Soto Perez out of the Spartacus Fight League. And
where's that located?
Oh, it's located in Virginia, but he's out of Fayetteville, North Carolina. He's hungry, he's disciplined, and he's a 2-time Spartacus Fight League champion.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
When you said Sparta, that kind of,
yes, sir.
That kind of. But I have a matchmaker that does that.
Okay.
And you know, all I do basically is I coordinate and put the events together. I have a matchmaker that puts the matches together for me when I do event. But you know what? If he can fight,
yes, sir,
I can definitely find that out. That's as long, and I believe in giving people opportunities, man, yes, and sharing my time as I am with you now. You know, sharing my time and my knowledge with anybody. You know, so if you ever come across a fighter, just send me an email with a name and a location, and I can pass it on to the matchmaker. And I can guarantee you, if he can fight and he's accessible, you know, everybody gets a shot, because everybody's looking for people to put fights together and looking for fighters. But I just demand that they know how to fight. I don't want nobody coming up like this. Because shit, I can do that. I got grandkids that do it better than that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Wade, thank you very much, Burt Watson.
We done?
We're done.
I got you.
Yes, sir. Hey, it's a blessing for me to interview you. It's an extreme honor to be a part, to just listen to you, just for you to just speak to me. You're literally history, and so I respect you, yes, sir, I'm thankful for your time.
Well, the one thing you can tell today is that you know, and it's always an honor for me to sit and talk with, you know, people that are interested in the media and do what you do, because I've learned a long time ago, nothing anybody says to me is not important. You know, I listen to everything and everybody. Wow. And when you listen, people listen to you from here, baby. And I know that. Don't you ever forget that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Watson.
You're very welcome, man. It's my pleasure. Anytime again, you know where I am, baby.
Yes, sir.
Peace.